annually, excluding millions and millions of SMEs from accessing the market, excluding millions and millions of young people from accessing the market. The lack of harmonization of our customs systems, limited industrial capacity, which we talked about, all of these challenges continue to constrain accelerated growth of intra-Africa trade. But we have sought, as a secretariat within our means, we have sought to directly confront these challenges, working with our development finance partners, Afreximbank, AFDB, Africa 50, and others. Allow me a few minutes to cite some examples of how we have, of the trade tools that we have developed and deployed to tackle some of these challenges. First, we've established the AFCFTA Adjustment Fund in partnership with Afreximbank, which today, as we speak, has been capitalized by an amount of $1 billion, and it is intended to support countries, governments, plus the private sector in the implementation of the AFCFTA. There will be targeted interventions of this capital that are deployed, particularly where we require in-country investment in industrial development, whether it is a special economic zone or indeed acquiring new capital machinery. This is what the fund is intended for. It is not intended for the Minister of Finance to say, thank you very much, I need budget support. It has to support industry, SMEs on the ground. Second, we've established the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, again, with Afreximbank. Our continent has 42 currencies. That means that when we are trading amongst ourselves as Africans, we have to resort to a third currency, typically the United States dollar. What has the United States dollar got to do with two African countries trading? And so with Afreximbank, we have established a digital tool that enables a trader, an economic operator, to transact using local currency without having to resort to a third currency. The cost reduction we estimated as a result of this intervention to be $5 billion annually. You now will be able to transact with your counterparty in Egypt. You transact in Namibian dollars. They receive Egyptian pounds. No dollar involved. The third intervention that we have made is the Africa Trade and Distribution, the establishment of the Africa Trade and Distribution Company, which as we speak today has a capitalization and a trade facility of $750 million. Its objective under the AFCFTA and Afreximbank, its objective is to support the aggregation of products and take them to market. And this is very important for informal traders who may not have the scale to present to a continental market. It is critical for smallholder farmers who also may not have the scale to present to a continental market. They now have an opportunity through aggregation and this Africa Trade and Distribution Company to reach market. Fourth, we have established the Africa Green Industrialization Initiative, which is being led by President Ruto, to take advantage of Africa's capacity at renewables, whether it is hydro, geothermal, or indeed solar and other forms of renewable energy, where we have committed to mobilize investment as we transition as a continent to decarbonization. We must create investment opportunities as we transition to decarbonization. I'm very pleased to report to you that in September, on the 6th of September last year, under the leadership of President Ruto and the African Union, heads of states, we signed an agreement with our commercial banks as well as development finance institutions, in terms of which we have committed to unlock $100 billion worth of investment in green trade and green industrialization. Our commercial banks have stepped up and have given this commitment that over the next 5 years, this is the amount of investment that they will unlock. The AFCFTA is pleased and honored to have been identified by the Assembly of Heads of States and Government as the AU organ that must roll out this Africa Green Industrialization Initiative. And finally, we have deployed technological advancements in terms of how we trade as a continent. We have deployed an electronic tariff book, an electronic rules of origin manual, which should enable economic operators to access markets more efficiently and more cost effectively. Supported by our DFIs, our continent must increase investment in transport infrastructure, green energy, as I've just indicated, industrial parks, and productive capacity. Our development finance institutions, all of them combined, have a balance sheet of close to $150 billion. This is what is required for us as a continent to invest in our own industrial development, to invest in our own supply chain establishment. Nobody is going to deliver development for our continent. These are not my words, these are the words of President Kagame. No one owes us development. We as a continent must accelerate the development of our own continent using our own resources, and in this example I've just cited, leveraging on the balance sheet of our development finance institutions. Yes, of course, we will have global partners, but the global partners must come to support the priorities that we as a continent set forward. So these far-reaching reforms that we have to undertake in transport and logistics, in customs systems harmonization, in industrial parks, in creating connectivity, I believe that these reforms will accelerate an increase in intra-Africa trade. I mentioned earlier, a few minutes ago, the evolving global context and how this, on the face of it, this global context appears to be challenging, but it is an opportunity. Supply chain restructuring is an opportunity. Where there's a fragmentation of supply chains in Europe, in India, in China, that's an opportunity for us as a continent to establish alternative centers of driving the global economy. The over-reliance on these global supply chains exposed our weakness as a continent. But now I believe we have an opportunity. The key question, therefore, is whether our economies as a continent are able to respond sufficiently to this current global context. Are we able as a continent and also individually as countries, are we able to rapidly restructure our national development strategies, enable our regions and our countries to build a commercially viable domestic market in response to this crisis? South Africa, next door, exports vehicles to the United States under AGOA. $2.4 billion worth of exports. The United States government decides that it is ending AGOA. The result is loss of market share, job losses, and of course, a devastating impact on livelihoods. The question I put to South Africa is, where else are you going to export those vehicles? The market is here in Africa. And so for us as Africans to pivot away from some of these markets that are unpredictable, that are uncertain, that are opaque, we must establish a domestic market here on our continent. Similarly, for those that are importing, I live in Ghana. You go to a restaurant, you will see on the menu, we import our beef from Australia. And they say it with pride. We have agricultural products here on our continent. We have beef in Namibia. We have beef in Botswana. What we have to do is to accelerate the establishment of supply chains to enable Namibian beef, Botswana beef, to reach the markets that are required. Uganda produces 1 billion liters of milk per year that are literally thrown away, post-harvest losses. But there's a market here on our continent. And therefore, there's a role for our development finance institutions to finance the establishment of supply chain networks that will enable the products to reach the market. It's going to be costly and it will take time. It took about 10 to 12 years before we, as a continent, started seeing the benefits of AGOA, because that's how long it takes to establish the supply chain networks. It, of course, should not take that long. And so the point I make, given the current context, Africa must build her own domestic market. And Namibia, in her strategy for economic development, I wish to humbly propose, must prioritize the continent of Africa. I was part of the team that negotiated the economic partnership agreements with the European Union. I also negotiated AGOA. And from my own humble experience, our exports under these arrangements are negligible. And so we've got to focus on building a domestic market. I mentioned earlier that industrialization moves beyond just the manufacturing sector. It is now linked to the digital economy and digital trade, innovation, green technologies. And all of this creates new possibilities for the African continent in the area of the digital economy, particularly for young people. As I draw to a close, let me return to the significance of today, Africa Day. Our founding mothers and fathers understood that political independence remains incomplete without economic sovereignty. 63 years later, and for the first time in its post-independence history, our continent has a very unique opportunity through the AFCFTA, Agenda 2063, the Africa we want, to accelerate industrial development, value addition, economic integration, and to give meaning to Pan-Africanism. Where we fail to accelerate our own industrial development as a continent, we will be failing our founding mothers and fathers of the Organization of African Unity. And so where the achievement is only political integration, we will not be living up to their expectations. And so it is up to you and me to make sure that our own individual responsibility takes us to take this task, that it compels us to take this task forward. Pan-Africanism without industrial development, without a viable economy, is nothing but a slogan. We must move beyond sloganeering and create a viable domestic market on our continent. I therefore encourage the private sector in Namibia, economic operators, to take advantage of this market, to look beyond SACU and SADC, to leverage actually on the experience of having traded successfully within SADC and within SACU to access a market of 1.4 billion people with a combined GDP of $3.4 trillion. This is the value proposition to the private sector. You have an opportunity to scale and to reach new markets. This is a moment for the private sector to explore new markets, expand production, invest in value-added production, leveraging support from our development finance institutions, and to accelerate job creation for young people through entrepreneurship. Namibia has already taken very important steps towards securing her place in a competitive, connected, and prosperous continent that is rapidly transforming. The priority now is to sustain and accelerate the momentum that the government has set and to create new opportunities for market through the AfCFTA. The next phase must move Namibia forward to manufactured and value-added production that will carry Namibian enterprise into the African market. It is also the path that Dr. Gurarab's own life exemplified, one requiring not only vision, but also execution. In honoring his legacy through this lecture series, Namibia, under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, International Relations, is not only commemorating what he achieved, but is also embracing the responsibility that still remains amongst us, the responsibility that takes account of the work that is yet to be done. The decisions that we take as a continent going forward will determine, indeed, our place in the global economy. Do we want to remain in the periphery of the global economy forever? Or do we want to build our own economic sovereignty and move beyond just saying that we have a GDP combined of 3.4 trillion United States dollars? Because GDP does not create jobs, does not put food on the table. We must ensure that we translate this significant market into opportunities for young people so that they can have confidence in our continent. The Secretariat, which I, as your humble servant, have the honor to lead, remains committed to supporting you, to supporting the private sector, to ensuring that we reach our objective of an integrated economy. So we are called today to reflect on our challenges as a continent. The lack of movement of persons is a very significant challenge. Visa restrictions amongst one another. The fact that an American or European passport is much easier to travel with across the continent than an African passport. This is a challenge for our heads of states. We must solve this issue of restrictions on movement of persons across the continent. The irony is that the colonialists left us with these visa rules, and yet we are sustaining them. So we've got to dismantle the colonial economic model, not only in an economic sense, but also in an ideological sense, where we see our continent and we see movement of persons as an advantage rather than a disadvantage. And so I close where I began, and that is by observing what is obvious to all of us: the current global environment. A multiplicity of unlawful wars, rising protectionism, as I said, attempts to weaken the multilateral trading system, all of these challenges that are external to Africa, indeed, will test our resolve. And we should be no doubt that because of these externalities, these global challenges, the historic task that all of us have of moving closer to economic integration in Africa will be even more difficult, if not almost impossible. It will be even more difficult given the current global environment. But it is an essential historic duty for us to discharge as Africans. As I mentioned, this crisis is an opportunity. And so these externalities must compel us as Africans to reflect on how we can navigate this crisis in a manner that creates opportunities for all of us. And I believe of all the tools that are available to us through the African Union, our heads of states, all of the tools that are available to us, intra-Africa trade, through the AfCFTA, is one tool that will enable us to reach this economic integration that all of us desire. In his seminal work, Professor Adedeji, the erstwhile Executive Secretary of the United Nations Commission on Africa, who pioneered the African Alternative Framework to structural adjustment programs, which of course were imposed on us, as you recall, he wisely counseled, and I quote, "Africa has to break the apron strings of structural and relational dependence on producing a limited number of cheap primary commodities for export," end quote. Africa has to break the apron strings. And I believe that for us to break these apron strings, we must accelerate the building, the construction of a viable domestic market for industrialization of our continent. I want to thank all of you very much for your attention, and I wish us a very happy Africa Day. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. Indeed, before I give a small reflection, I do like to apologize that I didn't recognize the presence of the Executive Director of the Ministry of International Relations and Trade, Madam Nita Nipondoka Rubeati. My apologies for that. I also like to recognize the presence of the former Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Dr. Pierre Mushelenga, who has also joined us. And all deputy ministers and senior government officials that have joined us, please feel welcome. We do apologize that we recognized you earlier. Indeed, if I could sum up the brief presentation that we received, or the keynote lecture, indeed it's thought-provoking. So many issues that came out, talking about currency conversion issues, travel restrictions, challenges for small SMEs that want to penetrate the market, dismantling of the economic setup that came as a result of colonial setup. But one thing which is important, which he pointed out, that I think that most of us always take for granted, that is reforming the political setup in any African country. That is where it starts. People always talk about that economics is first, but truthfully, politics is about deciding who gets what, when, and how. If you can make that of commitment first there, I think everything else really, really changes. And that is also what I picked up from your presentation, and also the fact that no one owes us development. It must come here from the continent. So if we don't do our part, then definitely we will have challenges. I'm pleased to say that in terms of the structural adjustment programs that you referred to, which we can all collectively agree that indeed pose restrictions on Namibia, that our founding president then said no. If he would have said yes, it means the size of our economy, the size of the state-owned enterprises would have been hardly affected. And we know that state-owned enterprises in Namibia, in terms, for instance, a couple of years ago, the value of pension contribution with sustained investment in Namibia, for instance, has been above over 30 billion. So definitely, we might not be there, but we're definitely moving towards that discussion. But however, thank you very much for those contributions. I do apologize that we did not have the music interlude, but I think This discussion is too rich, it's too important, and we have limited time available. So I want to open up the floor. I do apologize that we seem to be having some challenges with power connectivity, and I do hope that our host is busy attending to that as well. We do apologize for that. In terms of the questions, we can allow one question per person at a time, and if you can be very direct with your question, who you are posing it to, is it to the minister or is it the Secretary General? Please be very specific, and if I can ask one question per person to allow as many people as possible. It is now 7:34, and we should be done by 8 o'clock. So I think first round, we'll have a set of 3 questions. I see there's a floating mic at the back. Can I ask the gentleman in black? So can I have the first show of hands? I have Dr. Pea Mushelenga has his hand up. I have Madam here, and I have the second Madam here. So those are the first 3 questions that we have. Please be brief, direct, so that we can also have an opportunity to get responses.
Thank you. Mine is not a question because I came in a bit late and only had the last part. It's more of a comment to support what the SG was talking about, the need to have industrial-based economies on the continent for us to integrate now the continental economy. It is true, when you look, for example, in the SADC region, you probably have only about 2 countries or so whose economies are industrially based. When you look countries in Western Africa, so many of them produces, for example, cacao beans. Yet we go and buy chocolates from Europe always. I would indeed support that we should concentrate on industrialization of our economies on the continent as we move towards the continent becoming a free trade area. I so submit.
Thank you. Can I have the microphone here? Just the second row here in front, second row. Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm Nipudilo Yashindi, a student for International Relations, Diplomacy and Management. I have 2 questions, very brief. I don't know if I should ask all of them now or you give me another chance.
One at a time. Hopefully
Okay, the first one, okay, maybe I must just direct all my questions to His Excellency. The first question is, maybe first I should commend the progress made so far by AFCFTA. And the question I have, the first one is, can Africa achieve true economic integration without first achieving industrial sovereignty? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Now the second question, she's next to her. Yes.
Mine is not going to be brief. It's now. My name is Talita Klabanelo.
No, I think just hold the microphone closer to you.
Hello.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Your Excellency, thank you for your insightful presentation. I could like to ask the following question. Your Excellency, intra-Africa trade is important not only for expanding market access, but also to promote industrialization, economic diversification, and inclusive development within Africa economics such as Namibia. Sorry, toch. overall, how can Namibia address its existing economic constraints and developmental challenges in order to maximize intra-Africa investment and trade opportunities under the African Continental Free Trade Area? And what do you see as the potential benefits and risk for Namibia within this evolving economic continental trade framework? And I also want to know who is founding the African Continental Free Trade Area. I thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we have, since the other one was a contribution, can we have the gentleman here on the right for the third question?
Thank you, Master of Ceremony, Your Excellency. I'd like to know on that $1.5 trillion digital economy by, I think, 2030, where are we now? What are the gaps on interoperability and bank settlements among our respective central banks?
Thank you so much. That was the first round of questions. Your Excellency, the podium is yours. Okay, again, I think there's a mic. Yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the questions and the comments. Let me start with the last question. As we speak today, the payments infrastructure on our continent is it is not suitable to supporting a viable integrated market. If you make a payment, you are in Ghana, your counterparty is in Kenya. You make a payment using any other method apart from SWIFT, apart from PABS, I'm sorry, your money starts in London or New York, and then it goes to Kenya. With the Pan-African payment and settlement system, we are eliminating that. If you go from Ghana to Kenya, there's a direct flight. There is no reason why money should not move directly. So we have to build a payments infrastructure for the continent that will enable interoperability of payment systems. The East African community, West Africa. So we need a payments infrastructure that each bank or central bank or commercial bank can switch onto that payments infrastructure to access a payment system in another part of the continent. So somebody has got to invest in building the technology, which Afreximbank has, invest in making liquidity available for the settlements, for the payments, which they have. And here when we took PABS to the Assembly of Heads of States to be endorsed, we were not saying that any other payment system is not acceptable. We are simply saying, we as Africans, in order for us to have payment sovereignty, we must control our own payment systems. And that's exactly what has happened. Today, there are 21 central banks that have switched onto PABS. There are 148 commercial banks that have also switched onto PABS. They are, depending on the region of the continent, some are moving much faster to adopt and move towards PABS. Others are a bit slower. But really for us, the essential part of achieving payment sovereignty is being able to control your own payment system and your own payments infrastructure. Any player in the market that is available, that has the liquidity and the capital available to invest in the payments infrastructure, we support that. The protocol on digital trade is clear. We are technology neutral, we are partner neutral. What we support is the reduction of the cost of payments in Africa. Any partner that can deliver that ambition is certainly our partner, and that is what has happened with Afreximbank. We must reduce this reliance on third currencies for trade. It also leads to other political problems. You say something that upsets somebody in Washington or in London, you are kicked off a payment system. You can't transact. So where is our sovereignty in that? In terms of industrial development, what we have to, and this is our task with the ministers of trade, what we have to avoid is delivering economic integration only de jure or only at law. We must make sure that as much as the AfCFTA has been negotiated by lawyers and adopted, and we have achieved at law, we have achieved the integration, but where it will matter the most is the interconnectedness, for example, of our regional value chains. We have hydrogen in Namibia. How do we connect Namibia to other markets for exploration and investing in hydrogen? We have next door Namibia, I mentioned. How do we create an interconnectivity in next to Namibia, rather, is Botswana? How do we create an integrated agricultural sector so that we complement on each other's competitive advantages? One of the issues that I consistently raise with South Africa is you must make sure that as we implement integration, that there are shared benefits. You can't have a situation where there is a concentration of industrial development in one country. That is it will lead to the integration model that we are pursuing to be rejected, and correctly so. So we've got to take concrete steps to make sure that our industrial development is shared. If next door South Africa is assembling vehicles, what components can be manufactured in Namibia? Lithium batteries, for example. Let's map out the type of integration that we want to see and the model of integration that we want to see, and it must be of shared benefits across countries and in country. Otherwise, the integration we want to see is not going to succeed. I believe that industrial development must be the anchor of our integration because we need to build the supply chain capabilities, for example. So we have to be able to do both as a continent. We have to be able to accelerate and advance the legal implementation of the agreement. At the same time, we must be able to establish supply chains and centers of excellence across the continent. And I will give you another example. In 2022, the very first vaccine manufacturing plant opened in Rwanda. And it is connected to Senegal and also to Ghana in terms of the supply chain and the manufacturing. So this is exactly the kind of integrated industrial development that we should strive for. I mentioned also the issue of beef imports into West Africa from other parts of the world. We have the capability to establish a continental supply chain so that these goods are able to move freely. Of course, there's the issue of financing and capital that is required to invest in that. So I'm saying that our industrial development must move at the same time. Thank you. It must move at the same time as we implement the agreement. I think those were the questions.
Thank you so much. Can we have a second round of questions? Okay. Okay. They say the future is female, and yes. So I'm going to give preference to the women. Gents, I'm sorry, I will do my best to attend to you. Let's start there. Just keep your hands up so that we can also select. So we measure a bit. Yes, can we have the floating mic?
Yes.
Okay, please, go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Twilika Elias. I am a public policy analyst as well as a monitoring and evaluation professional and a student with the School of Diplomatic Studies at the University of Namibia. First, I must say that I'm very proud to be Namibian and also very proud of the country Namibia in Africa, where for the work that the continent continues to do, we are not where we must be, where we want to be, but we are also not where we were 10 years ago, 15 years ago. My question goes to His Excellency. You mentioned of the Africa Continental Free Trade Adjustment Funds. Can you provide more information on how small, medium enterprises from Namibia can access these funds and have access to this support? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we can take the microphone to this gentleman here in the middle in white. So, gentleman here in white here.
Good evening. I'm Renatus Matthews, an economic student at UNAM. So my question is based on the zero tariff trade. So basically, Namibia receives its most, let me say, its revenue comes from SACU. The highest revenue comes from SACU. Now we put zero tariffs, so the SACU pool then shrinks. Are there implementations that will then enable Namibia to get other sources of income?
Okay. Let me have the young lady there. Yes. Right there, right there. Why are you looking behind? It's you. Yes.
Good evening. My name is Iris Shimanda. I am a business administration student at the University of Namibia and also part of the Student Representative Council as the Secretary General. I'd like to ask, when we talk about youth integrating into the growth of the African community through trade, young people face steep hurdles, particularly regarding access to trade finance and cross-border movement. From the Secretariat's perspective, what immediate practical steps are being taken to dismantle these barriers so that youth innovation can directly contribute to regional growth?
Okay, thank you. We will come back after the SG has responded. I think the last question is from one SG to another. So, yes. So I think you'll take that one first, maybe.
I think Comrade SG there is a harbinger of things to come for her in future. Well, the customs reduction and elimination to zero, when you eliminate duties, your imports increase. That enables the government to levy value-added tax on that, on the increased number of goods crossing the border. So the government, it may lose revenue from the duties, but it will gain from value-added tax or general sales tax, whichever domestic arrangement is in place in country. Now, as for SACU, similarly, I believe that goods coming out of SACU into SACU, where we are at zero duty, those goods will enable the individual governments to levy domestic tax, sales tax, or value-added tax. So I think our studies indicate that, yes, from the perspective of revenue generation, tariffs, the elimination of tariffs will lead to reduced revenue, but revenue is also increasing in terms of sales tax and value-added tax. The second point I would make is that we have to move away from the model where we look at tariffs and duties as a tool of as a revenue generation tool. We should not look at tariffs as a revenue generation tool. We should look at tariffs as a tool for industrial development. particularly in relation to third countries and products coming in from third countries that should be subject to a duty who are not in the free trade area. On the adjustment fund, it is in 3 pillars. There is the general fund, which is intended for, is a concessional window that is intended for mega projects. There's the base fund, which is for member states. And then there is the credit pillar, which is for private sector. The way to access it would be for us to have a conversation with Namibia about which network of banks do we want to work with so that this network of banks, 2 or 3, can have access to the fund. The fund doesn't lend directly to individuals. It is intended for onward lending. So a bank comes to the fund and says that we want to be your partner in distributing however much capital intended for SMEs. And we, as a bank, commit not to put a spread on the margin. And that's how you, as the SME, will access it in-country, on the ground. So it's not direct. It is through an intermediary local bank. There was a question from I think the SG. Can you repeat the question, please?
She talked about dismantling the barriers, especially towards
and young people
and
accessing.
Young people, yes.
What we have introduced tools that will enable young people to better understand the rules of the AFCFTA. We have an AFCFTA youth forum. We convene it once a year. In that forum, we raise awareness amongst young people about the rules of the agreement, as I've just said, market intelligence, which market do you want to export to? We create connectivity between entrepreneurs that are in attendance. We also provide master classes for better understanding of the AFCFTA. Last week in Lome, we convened Biashara Africa, which is a business forum, and a segment of that was youth in trade. And we connected young people with commercial banks that are able to do lending. We connected them with potential trading partners from across the continent. We laid out all of the different sectors of the economy where they can start engaging in. So that is what we are doing to empower young people to be active participants in Africa's trade. Unfortunately, we don't have money, but we have friends who have money. And these are very good friends who are able to provide the support. Now that leads me to the question that Mama asked. We get our funding from member states of the African Union. So every year, the African Union subcommittee, budget subcommittee distributes member states' contributions to all of us. But it is very, very negligible. Most of our support comes from Afrexim Bank, African Development Bank, and some of our commercial banks. And the European Union. There is a program that the European Union supports. That is our financing scheme. We are working towards self-sufficiency, where we leverage on, let's say, for example, intellectual property rights to make sure that they are registered with us and we generate revenue from that. But that is very important, the financing question.
Okay, thank you so much, SG. We are out of time, but however, I've been given leeway to have 5 questions. So I will no longer take a question from the left side, unfortunately. I'm going to go to the right. Please, I do apologize for the time factor. I'm going to start Who is a floating mic? Right here in front, with the exception of our parts of the diplomatic corps.
Thank you very much, Excellency. It's great to see you again. My name is Linda Scott. I just have a question. I understand that there's over $90 billion coming to Africa from the diaspora. And I'm just wondering, you mentioned intra-Africa payments have been addressed, which is great. Now, what about the payments coming into Africa? Because, in fact, what we find is that payments that are made, say, for example, in Europe, by an African sending money, whether it to whatever African country it would be, end up paying far above the UN advised amount. So can be anything up to 10%. So if you're sending for $100, you'll be paying $10 to the provider. So how can the AFCFTA assist the diaspora and the people in Africa to get that money with less payment to the providers? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. The gentleman there at the back, on your right, yes. Let's start with him, yes, and then the one next to him.
Good evening, Your Excellency. Good to see you again. Last time we met was COVID-19. Welcome back to your country. Honorable Minister, greetings. Happy Africa Day to all of you. Your Excellency, my question is as follows. How can small-scale producers and SMEs across Africa be effectively empowered to access and penetrate the opportunities created by the Africa Continental Free Trade Area? Additionally, could you share practical examples and success stories from across the continent where SMEs or local producers have successfully leveraged AFCFTA or regional integration frameworks to expand their businesses and participate in regional value chains? Thank you.
Thank you so much. The gentleman next to him. Yes.
All right, thank you. My name is Desiderius Amotenya. I'm a veteran student activist. My question is very simple. The main speaker have mentioned of trade barriers and also dismantling the colonial legal system. What strategies does the AFCFTA have in place to help accelerate that and also help with the harmonization of trade policies and also domesticating trade policies?
Okay. So I have the unpopular decision. So I'm going to speak out to Josiah for the sake of all the other young people that they have their hands up. I'm sorry. I'm going to, Josiah, bring the mic to this gentleman here. But especially SMEs, private sector, seed capital, very important. And it's in that aspect, and I think it will be fair if he represents all of you. I'm sorry I'm making a unilateral decision and there's not democracy, but I hope you will forgive me. Yes. Yes, Josiah, please.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Apologies for everyone else. I think my question is really around, where we are right now with the Africa Free Trade Continental Area. Given that, lots of countries have signed on, but on the ground, as was mentioned, nothing much is going on. So the question really is around, what are the greatest bottlenecks stopping this? And we know, especially in Namibia's case, I think we had a car assembly plant, set up, ready to export, but then for various reasons, I believe around, rules of origin, that couldn't happen, and then obviously that died. And I'm sure that has happened in many other industries, including textiles. So how can we overcome that to make sure that when entrepreneurs or governments set up, let's say manufacturing sites, to export, they are not blocked in such a manner, and jobs are created, and clearly the economies are built in these countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As they come this side, as they say, young people are fast, but elders know the way. So the final question will come from Professor Peter Kachavivi.
Thank you very much. I wasn't really going to ask a question, but rather I was provoked by our guest of honor. He said they don't have funds, but they've got good friends who could intervene if needed. And I wanted to simply say that when everything's said and done, I must declare interest. My dear brother, Theo Ben-Gurion, of whom I succeeded as a speaker, I did not expect to be trusted with the responsibility of being honored to champion the cause of the Library of Parliament. And I'm raising this question first to start with the lectures, the series of lectures that we're having ought to be documented, well prepared, and to be made accessible. And we can only do that if we utilize our offer. I'm now the champion of the Library of the Namibian Parliament. So I'm basically declaring interest here to say that we want to make sure that the lectures, ideas, reflections that are being made available in the name of Dr. Theo Ben-Gurion are equally preserved and made extensively available. And we, at the Parliament of Namibia, are interested. And we like to offer our Minister of Foreign Affairs to be aware of the fact you have allies who are ready to join you to make sure that this information is made available, particularly to the younger generation and our students, not only in our universities here. At the last graduation at the University of Namibia of Science and Technology, we graduated close to 200 foreign students. So we are simply saying that we are available to join hands to make sure that the knowledge and information generated is not kept in the vacuum, but made extensively available. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that intervention, Prof. Thank you. I think that was also the final contribution. So you've run about 4 questions. So I think one of them talked about those bottlenecks, how do we remove them? Talked about the example of the Peugeot plant in Walfish Bay that serves as a stumbling block, and I think it also goes to the other question on SACU. What are some of those limitations that we have? And obviously opportunities for SMEs again coming up. How do we dismantle the colonial setup and harmonize economic integration? Yeah, so yes.
Again, thank you for the comments and the questions. Excellency, the way PAPS is set up at the moment is to facilitate intra-Africa payments. The next phase will be to consider switching onto other payments platforms around the world. That's when the remittances, the disbursement of remittances will be facilitated when the payments platform itself is connected to the payments platform outside of Africa. So that is the next phase. Regarding the question on SMEs, our immediate challenge is to make sure that SMEs benefit from this market. SMEs create over 470 million jobs in Africa and contribute close to 60% to Africa's GDP. It's a very, very important segment of our society. SMEs, informal traders, as well as smallholder farmers. As I mentioned just last week in Lome, we had Biashara Africa. And part of, in the sessions, we had what we call the SME deal room, where we connected SMEs to the market. We set out, if you are an SME and you produce tea or coffee, we provide the market intelligence for which countries require the tea or the coffee. We connect you with a potential funder, EcoBank, Equity Bank, whichever bank that can possibly finance that transaction. This is on the practical market access side. The advisory services that we provide to SMEs about market intelligence, market access, as well as connectivity with other SMEs. When we started the Guided Trade Initiative in 2022, and this is in direct answer to your question about practical examples, myself and President Ruto went to see off the shipment of tea that was being sent to Ghana. That tea was produced by smallholder farmers in Kenya, whom the government organized into cooperatives. So a smallholder farmer in Mount Kenya, in the region Mount Kenya, goes to the cooperative, presents their products, the cooperative aggregates them, and takes them to market in West Africa. This happened also with other products, coffee from, agricultural products from Rwanda to Nigeria, where similarly we connected the SMEs to the market. What I mentioned, the Africa Trade and Distribution Company, in my view, will be absolutely critical, because it is going to become, and it's only been established 4 months ago, it is going to become the intermediary between the SME and the market. And so what it will do is to aggregate all of the products, let's say in Namibia. It will aggregate all of the products that SMEs produce in Namibia, package them, and export them to whichever market they are destined. And so these interventions, advisory in terms of market, export readiness advisory, as well as direct lending support by banks, absolutely critical for SMEs. It also means that Madam Executive Director, her workload will increase, because when the Africa Trade and Distribution Company comes to Namibia, the government will have to mobilize the private sector and the SMEs and bring them together to enable them to bring their products, put their products together, take them to the ATDC for export. The final question about harmonization, as I said, it is happening at law. The rules, the trade rules are harmonized. However, some countries are slower than others. Namibia, you heard, gazetted. There are about 24 countries that have not yet gazetted. They have not yet domesticated the instrument. So I am pleased in the sense that from a legal perspective, we have achieved a lot in terms of harmonization. What is required now is for us to accelerate the implementation at national level. That is really the task at hand. But the harmonization of rules has been achieved, except in the area, as I said, except in the area of movement of persons, which has not progressed. We have just a few countries, a handful of countries in Africa that provide visa on arrival. Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, Rwanda, and recently Togo made an announcement. So we must move much, much faster in this area of enabling Africans to move freely across the continent. And I often say that there is nobody is going to overtake anybody else's country. People will come in, conduct business, and leave. And we should not design a continental policy for an exception. People who overstay are an exception. The vast majority of people conduct business and then they leave. So we have to convince our heads of states that we need to move much faster on this. As regards the question on the rules of origin, let me just say that I know the colleague said not much is happening on the ground. The AFCFTA became operational in 2020. The European Union was established in 1946 on the ashes of the Second World War. It took 72 years for the European Union to reach this level of market integration, including a single currency. So I think we must understand that for us to overcome the decades and decades and decades of fragmentation, it's not going to happen overnight. It will take time. On the rules of origin, what we have agreed, what the ministers of trade have agreed to, let's say in the auto sector, is a local content rules of origin of 40% in 5 years' time. So 5 years from now, 40% will be the local content requirement for a vehicle. And I have to tell you, the minister was very, very strong in defending and advancing Namibia's interests. Because the minister made it very clear that, yes, Namibia wants to move to 40%, but we need time to transition, to build capacity in the domestic market. And the point that the minister made was taken and is reflected in the decision. I'm not familiar with all of the facts of the plant that you mentioned, Peugeot, but what I would say is that SACU has the same rules of origin, and so does SADC. So a manufacturing that happens in Namibia is at law acceptable in all other countries in SACU and indeed in SADC. And going forward, manufacturing that is undertaken in Namibia will be acceptable to the extent that it meets the rules of origin, will be acceptable in the 49 other countries that have ratified the agreement. So we are creating a continental domestic market, a domestic industry that is across 50 countries. So these issues around rules of origin are absolutely key. They are at the heart of creating a continental market. And finally, I would also say on this point that country X, if you are producing, you are Peugeot, you are producing in Namibia, you don't have to have that entire 40% locally sourced in Namibia. We count the 40% in terms of where you source all of your components from all over the continent. That's how we call it cumulation. That's how you reach the 40%. So you could get components from Ethiopia, rubber from Liberia, until you reach the 40%. So it is really you are not restricted to the domestic market. You can search your components and source your components outside of the country, because we want industrial development that is across the continent. I think those were the questions. If program director, I left out a question, it's probably because it's too difficult, but I think I answered all of them. Thank you.
Yes, I think we're all in agreement that all the questions were answered, yes. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Thank you also that the Honorable Minister is back. One of the things that we're taking away is that when you talk about the GDP of Africa estimated to be at 3.4 trillion, in terms of the top 10 economies for this year, the world economy is projected to be at 126 trillion, and the size of the French economy is expected to be at around about 3.5 trillion. So you can see the size of the whole African continent vis-a-vis compared to that of France. And definitely if you're looking at issues of SWIFT payment, I think you talked about the volatility of this. We know how SWIFT systems were used during, the unprecedented times. Now we're seeing countries are removed from systems. So imagine you are a Namibian SME that wants to make payment, but because of a difference and multilateralism is a threat, you can't make a payment. You'd definitively be affected. So I think those are thoughts that we have to linger on as a nation, and definitively I think we are behind the PEP system to ensure that we are able to make payments much easier and Namibian businesses to connect. Before the Deputy Minister gives us a vote of thanks, I think I want to give the opportunity to the Minister to say a few words.
No, thank you very much. Let me first thank Professor Kachavivi and to also thank you for your commitment to the Theo Ben Gurion lecture series. Thank you for the offer. All the lectures are recorded, so we are going to donate copies to the library. Thank you very much. And to actually thank the young people really for having come out in numbers, the Secretary General made mention of the Youth Forum, and I thought I need to say a word or two about that. Having served in Ghana as Namibia's High Commissioner and having seen in practice what the Youth Forum actually means. These youth forums are not only platforms for networking. These are forums where young people come to demonstrate their businesses. And I have seen young people come to these youth forums and they go away having formed joint ventures with other young people. So this lecture was also food for thought. What we are working on in the ministry is how to avail opportunities to SMEs especially to attend the youth forum. Of course, it's expensive. We are working with our governors to start taking at least one SME from all the 14 regions at the time, and then we will increase as time goes, because I think it's a very, very important platform. Secondly, we have made late emphasis on industrialization, which is critical. It's the precursor to manufacturing. You don't industrialize, you don't manufacture. If you don't manufacture, you continue to export raw materials. But I think in addition to industrialization having that capacity, we also have to continue to change, to have a mind shift. For us as Africans to begin to appreciate made in Africa. We have young people exhibiting their furnitures all over the place, but would rather go and buy elsewhere and leaving these young people's furnitures. Now, whom do we think is going to buy those furnitures? That's where it starts. So we need to begin to appreciate made in Africa so that we can add impetus to our industrialization process. Secretary General, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Honorable Minister, for those words. I now have the honor to call upon Honorable Jenely Matundu, the Deputy Minister of International Relations and Trade, to do the vote of thanks.
Your Excellency Wamkelemene, Secretary General of the AFCFTA Secretariat, Honorable Ambassador Salma Shipala Musavi, Minister of International Relations and Trade, Honorable Ministers, Deputy Ministers, Members of Parliament present, members of the Diplomatic Corps, Ms. Kuriras, our beloved widow, Dr. Panduleni Tula, President of the Independent Patriot for Change, the official opposition party in the Republic of Namibia. Distinguished guests, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. It is my singular honor and privilege to deliver the vote of thanks at the conclusion of this important and insightful 25th session of the Dr. Theoben Krugerap Lecture Series, held under the theme, Can Intra-African Trade Enhance Namibia's Economy? Allow me firstly to express our sincere appreciation to His Excellency Wamkele Mene, Secretary General of the AFCFTA Secretariat, for delivering a thoughtful, provoking, and enriching keynote lecture this evening. Your Excellency, we are deeply grateful for your valuable insights on the implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area and the opportunities it presents for economic transformation, regional integration, industrialization, and intra-African trade. Your perspectives have undoubtedly enriched our understanding of how Namibia can position itself to fully benefit from the AFCFTA framework. I also wish to extend sincere appreciation to Honorable Ambassador Selma Shipala-Musavi, Minister of International Relations and Trade, for her leadership
and in order to do it, you must think.
To creating platforms.
Don't say, I believe. Okay, so or say that on Sunday when you go to church or Friday at mosque. You can say, I believe that, that's fine. But once you've gone there, you don't believe, think. And say, how do we solve this problem? That becomes your responsibility. And we are both of us very confident that you will live up to that responsibility. But principals, let me say thanks a lot for having us. We are sorry to disturb your classes. I want to say thanks a lot to Professor Fahim here for taking on this responsibility to answer so many questions. But principal, thanks a lot to yourself, to the other principals, and to the students. If you want us to come again, because you are very important people, our future is in your hands. But thanks a lot.
I will just say something after you.
Good morning, everyone. President Thabo Mbeki, Dr. Fayemi, and his distinguished guests. My name is Nzala Mativa, and on behalf of Milnerton, I would like to say the vote of thanks. Firstly, I would love to thank President Thabo Mbeki and Dr. Fayemi for gracing us with your presence today. It was our utmost gratitude to welcome you today. And I would like to sing this Africa Day that we all come here to celebrate. And may we all leave today with the words and the wisdom that you...
Before I hand over to Mr. Kasim for final arrangements, first of all, just from my side also, President and Professor, thank you for sharing your wisdom. But a huge thank you to all the schools and learners out there sharing your questions. And I truly believe, and as the President and Professor was saying, we truly believe in you. Let's go out there. Let's challenge everything. Let's think, like the President was saying. Don't believe everything. But we need to be united. We need to challenge this difficult situations out there. And as President Thabo Mbeki has said, I am an African. So I think, let everybody stand up and say, I am an African. Congratulations and thank you very much. I just want to ask, before I give to Mr. Kasim, that the representatives in the foyer, we just want to sign the visitor's book, but also be a commitment that we will continue this conversation and invite everybody back. And then lastly, a huge thank you to the Thabo Mbeki that made this possible, Mr. Bulani Vetu, that made this connection that we could experience this wonderful Wisdom Day. Thank you very much, and thank you for your engagement. Thank you.
Okay, boys and girls, like how we've welcomed him in here, as the delegations move out, we're going to give them a round of applause, okay? 1, 2, 3. Okay, whilst you guys are there, we want to get a picture with all of you guys. So, okay. Will the principals, visiting principals, you are going to join us in principal's office for 5 minutes after this. So please don't go away. Okay, come through, sir. Come, mister. Okay. Everybody is on the way. Okay, smile, everybody. Okay, and let's do a nice all hands up, everybody. Africa. There we go. Amanjla, guys. Delegation goes out. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. We're almost done. Please be seated. Thank you. I'm going to ask the visiting school learners if you could just go out and wait for your principal and teachers in front of the hall. Okay. We're going to keep them for about 10 minutes, and then they're going to join you to go back to your schools. Okay, so the visiting schools, can you go out first, please? If you need to remain, they told you to sit and wait for them here, it's fine as well. You want to wait here?
So, today is about conversations.
Boys and girls. Teachers, there's seats for you in the front if you'd like to come in. All protocols observed. All good? Okay, boys and girls, I'd like to hand over to my principal, Mr. Fantonda.
First of all, good morning, former President Thabo Mbeki. Also, Professor Kiyaudi Fayema, our guest lecturer from Mbeki Foundation. our honored guests, principals, educators, and the most important, these people that is at Buren High School, Postmilliton High School, and to be part of Africa Day here at Milton High School. Today is not an ordinary school day. Today, a day that reminds us, despite our different cultures, backgrounds, languages, that we are one continent is important. Will it be an Africa divided by challenges or united by opportunity? Is it Africa waiting for change or an Africa led by young people? Talking about you. Focus on tests, exams, and marks. But you know what? Education is more important than that. Education is about developing creative minds, courage, voices, and imagine a better future. So, today is about conversations. It will be a day that will impact your future. Our former president, Thabo Mbeki, spent many years speaking by Africans themselves. Will remain to our former president.
This is Africa Day. This is Africa Day. It is on our continent that we are going to go marching in the streets until it's a public holiday here in this country. And for many of the years, we've held the Africa Day lecture to stand up. All was packed. More important to stand up. All was packed. More important, the hall was packed. More important, the person, Professor, we must welcome. Principal has explained. And what year was it? And what year was it? I can hear the whispers. I can't hear what you're saying. It was a lot more than a century later. You know, we have these arrogant Europeans who sit there. They decide that they want to own the continent. So they come and they take in 84, 85. When they sit among themselves and say, Belgium, take the Congo. Unfortunately, the first sub-Saharan Africa, sub-Saharan African country to liberate itself, you remember what it was? Which one? Must be decided by all of us acting together. Professor Fayemi yesterday, day before yesterday, when he delivered the lecture, was posing that question to ourselves on the 25th of May, 1963. And being an honest man, he asked honest questions and embarrassed us, some of us South Africans. He was saying, for instance, 1960 decided they didn't like the 1960 decided they didn't like the Nigerians who were in Ghana. They chased them away, beat them up, go away, go home. Nigerians who were in Ghana. They chased them away, beat them up, go away, go home. The Nigerians, Ghanaians who don't want to go home, 2 years later, those years ago never worked. It didn't solve a single problem. Why are you doing something in South Africa which never solved anything? Something in South Africa which never solved anything. Very correct question. On the 5th of May in 1963, we share a common destiny, I'm saying, as the principal was saying, and therefore we must act together to define that destiny as Africans. What are we doing? So we're very, very glad, Principal, to be here, to be with the students and the teachers, particularly the students, because what I was told, a decision, that you are going to approve a resolution this morning. And the resolution will say, we the students, Cape Town, these various important schools have taken a decision. Am I right? You say thanks a lot for that commitment. I'm waiting to see this resolution, to see what it actually says. But that's why we are here, and thank you very much for coming. Now, and then Principal has said you must pose questions and difficult ones. The last thing I wanted to say, Principal, is Professor Fayemi is the one who's going to answer the questions. So me, I'm here.
Thank you, President Thabo Mbeki. So, Professor, we are really looking forward, and already, like I said, we're already excited. So thank you very much for sharing the stage.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Thank you, Principal, and thank you, Mr. President. Students, good morning. It's really a delight to be with you this morning. President Mbeki has explained why we're here, and I'm sure you would agree with him that that Written 63 decided was done in the hope that succeeding generations of Africans to think strategically, to decide in the overall interest of the citizens of Africa, regardless of where they may reside, the religion they practice, what they look like, as long as they are Africans, resident in Africa. It is in the collective interest of all Africans. The decision has been explained. Africans are committed, a consistent position, even when the Organization of African Unity transformed to the, and which happened, by the way, here in South Africa. What year was that? Could any one of you tell me when the Organization of African Union became the, of African Unity became the African Union? No. Even the Organization of African Unity was not established in 1954. You heard Mr. President tell us when it was established. But somebody said 2000 and called of the African. And who was South Africa's president in 2001? Who was South Africa's president in 2001? President Thabo Mbeki. So you could almost argue that the father of the Constitutive Act, President Thabo Mbeki. That speech that I am an African. You remember that? Okay. We won't go there now, but are you African? You be a proud South African and a proud African? They are compatible? You agree that they're compatible? You can be a proud South African and also be a proud African. No contradiction. Already have you prepared, raising your hand. I would identify, we'll take it from there. May I ask for just a sheet of paper, Mr. Principal? In case you have too many questions that my brain cannot carry. Thank you very much. Okay? Yes, no. I'll just take 3 questions in a row at a time. I'll try and right in front of me here. Good to know.
My question is, do you think the belief of Pan-Africanism is still achievable in the way Africa is going now?
Okay. That's a good question. Do I think Pan-Africanism is achievable the way Africa is going now? No, I think we should try and spread it. You're sitting next to her. Okay.
Okay, good morning, sir. I'm a student at Milnerton High School. I'm a grade 11 RCL member. My question to you is, does the African Renaissance, is it intention to completely eliminate African borders?
Right. No, I want to go right now. Oh, yes, actually I can see the gentleman on top. The black, oh yes, yourself. Your voice can carry, I'm sure. Oh, you're the head boy.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Given the global changes over the last 2 decades, how can the current generation of young Africans best advance the dream of continental unity and economic independence?
Continental unity and economic independence. Actually, the 3 questions are excellent and they are intertwined in my view. Do I think Pan-Africanism is achievable the way Africa is going now? Absolutely. I actually think we need Pan-Africanism more now than we've ever needed Pan-Africanism. If you look at the way the globe is structured and the dynamic changes that are occurring in the world, 1.4, 1.5 billion, and India, and all of the European Union, the European countries, it's about 800 million. So if you're looking at the demography, Africa actually is the growth engine. By the mid-21st century, 2050, the data shows clearly that 1 in every 4 human beings in the world will be African. So 1/4 of the world's population would reside on. Africa will completely dominate the population of the world. The median age in China, median age in India is 28. The median age in Africa is 18-9. If you act in isolation in Syria, or it's not our business what Angola is doing, every external actor can take advantage of our refusal or inability to act collectively. And that is why the idea and ideal of Pan-Africanism speaks more to integration, but not just physical integration, but also economic integration and integration of our consciousness in seeing that whatever happens to one African affects the Constitutive Act that I spoke about, emphasizes the goal of unity. But unity that it emphasizes does not necessarily mean unanimity. It doesn't mean that we will not have differences in style, in strategy, in mode of dressing or speaking, should not vitiate in any way that collective agenda of our citizens, as equality amongst all our citizens. And that is why many of the decisions taken at the security architecture, or you are talking of the Continental Free Trade Area, which aims to ensure that we have one common market, one currency. That's why they all spend the euro. And they have a common foreign policy, common agricultural policy. You can still have South Africa, Spain, memorandum of understanding, but it's within that. Just a few months ago, there was immediately after the G20 meeting here in South Africa, just November last year, the European Union and the African Union, African countries, they met in Angola to review progress. And what makes it, they don't want to negotiate in isolation. And that is why we should not act in isolation. Whether it is America that we're negotiating with, or the European Union, or China, or the rising Middle East powers, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, we should not allow a situation in which we go to meetings dividing that goal of Pan-Africanism. And that is why I believe that the goal is achievable in form, is also achievable in concrete content, in a manner that can have a meaning to the citizens of Africa. We cannot talk about trading together if there is no free movement of goods and services. We cannot talk about improving development if we cannot drive from Cape Town to Cairo. Because if you go to these other places, there is an agenda to have transportation network on the continent. There's an agenda to have the African standby force that can act in the interest of peace and security for all of us, wherever issues may arise. And clearly, it is something that we must commit ourselves to. Is the intention of the African Renaissance to eliminate borders? The truth of the matter is, and I'm sure it, are artificial borders. And if you check your history books, you will see that in many of the African states, the people who met in Berlin, they did not even have a sense of the map of the country that they were sharing amongst themselves. So it was just a ruler and a pen, and then you just draw it. You take this part, and you take this part. So you will come to a country like Nigeria, where I come from, the northeast of Nigeria, where you have the Boko Haram. I'm sure you know that, the insurgency in Nigeria. That part belonging to the same ethnicity have been divided into two different countries. It's like here in South Africa. If you are in Botswana, you have Tswanas that are on the Botswana side, but you also have Tswanas that are indigenous South Africans here. So how do you tell a Tswana in Botswana not to relate with the cousin in South Africa because of one line drawn across their ethnicities? And this is the common story all over Africa. There are Kans in Ghana and there are Kans in Cote d'Ivoire. The Hausas in Nigeria and the Hausas in Niger Republic. The Yorubas in Nigeria and the Yorubas in Benin Republic. The Wolof in Gambia and the Wolof in Senegal. All over Africa. The period the president was talking about was that so that this would not create new crises and new wars, those borders were regarded as extant and inviolable. Okay, to avoid further trouble, let's leave them this way, whilst we work on the bigger agenda of integrating all of us, rather than dividing ourselves again. Of course, we have not always succeeded with that primary goal. So you've seen South Sudan, and you've seen similar situations in one or two other countries on the continent. You've seen Western Sahara. Eliminating borders is not just eliminating physical borders, but also regarding ourselves as sharing a collective interest of economic integration, share the same values, regardless of the language. I think that goal is achievable. The intention is profound and necessary. And even now, it is even more imperative because it's a game of numbers. The world is fast becoming a game of numbers. And we need to be able to translate the numbers we have, that median that I just shared with you. It's no use having that demography. Look at how our young people are dominating many industries. I mean, I'm sure many of you are great fans of Tyler and Davido and Burna Boy. It's your generation. So world music is dominated by Africans. The digital financial tech world, Africans are leading lights there. So, but how do we ensure that we consolidate that? And the only way we can do that is to ensure that the youth demography that is in our favor is also youth wealth creation. It's in this. Not just when he became president, but way back. I was sharing in my lecture how I gained my own Pan-African consciousness just working as an intern, a university student intern, when he was the chief representative of ANC in Lagos. How many years ago was that? Can anyone tell me? He left in the early 80s, and then he was replaced by some other leading lights of the liberation movement. And that's why the South African liberation struggle was not won by South Africans alone. All Africans played a very critical role. I don't know whether the educational curriculum, your history curriculum in high school teaches that, but it's actually important for you to know that labor unions, market workers donated to the anti-apartheid struggle in order for us to have a liberated South Africa, because everybody in other parts of Africa felt they will not be liberated until the whole of Africa was liberated. And this is why it's important for you to continue the dream of continental unity and economic independence. This is partly what you're doing here. I mean, inviting the president to come and share his experience and he bringing us here is an indication that you at least you have a curiosity. You have an interest. And I hope by the time we leave, just as the president has said, we will have a resolution. But not just a resolution. I hope you would have a Pan-African club in your various schools, sharing knowledge, sharing experience, or what's happening in other parts of the continent, and how you can engage. This is the age of digital connection. Your Pan-African club should be able to network with Pan-African clubs in Nigeria, in Cote d'Ivoire, in Angola, wherever they be. The Thabo Mbeki Foundation and some of our other institutions that are already engaged in this work can also support that process of establishing it. But I think it's first learning about the Africa that you currently live in and how the historical trajectory from colonialism, from that appropriation of Angola that Mr. President spoke about, to the independence struggle in which Africans became sovereign countries, to independence with substance, independence with capacity. That's one of the things I spoke about on Saturday, that yes, we have attained flag independence in many African countries. We govern ourselves. But what does that independence really mean if it is public good, education to our children, jobs to the unemployed, safety and security in our countries, economic opportunities? That is the real independence. And that is the independence that you all, with the education you're getting, must aim to achieve in order to advance the cause of African unity and economic integration. Let me stop there and give another three. Yes. Okay. Yes, the lady right there. Okay, I'll come to her. Yeah. No, it's her.
My name is Akira Akub from Milnerton High School. I'm an RCL and the debate team captain. Obviously, the current political economy of the globe isn't ideal with Trump and Iran, the Israeli occupation in Palestine. Do you think Africa as a continent and an idea could withstand a war right now while still striving for these ideals of peace and unity you've spoken of?
Do I think Africa could withstand a war? War with who? War within, amongst ourselves, or with the external world?
A war, obviously our allies like Russia and China could call on us if there was a war in the external world, but regardless, if there was a war in the world, that would affect Africa's economy. Could we withstand that?
I think it's the lady. Oh, I can see them.
Good morning, sir. My name is Jocelyn Shi. So my question for you is, the theme for this week is rebuilding African unity in an age of fragmentation. What do you believe is the single biggest fragment or barrier currently preventing African nations from working together? Thank you.
The gentleman in red.
Good morning, sir. I'm part of the exec body of Milnerton High School and RCL chairperson. So do you think Muammar Gandhi's idea of United States of America is realistic in today's political climate? And if so, how can it be implemented?
Whose idea of United States?
Gandhi's.
Oh, Mahatma. Oh.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Muammar Gaddafi.
Muammar Gaddafi. Okay, yes, let me take.
Hello, sir. My name is Katlego Munare. I'm the president of African Society here in Milnerton High School, sir. And
You're president of Africa Society?
Yes, sir.
Oh, wonderful. You already have an African Society here.
Yes, sir. So, sir, my question is, since colonization, and even still today, Africans have been alienated from their Africanism. What advice can you give to us as teenagers to counteract this alienation and to rediscover and embrace our Africanism? Thank you, sir.
Okay. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to pass a few questions to Mr. President because he has quite extensive knowledge of some of these issues, more than I do. And when you're talking about someone like Muammar Gaddafi, the president was his colleague, and the president had done about the United States of America. And it's also a question that the president has ruled at. But let me answer your first question on, do I think Africa can withstand a war if we're drawn into a war by... The first answer that I will give you on that is a quote from one of the fathers of Pan-Africanism, Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana. Kwame Nkrumah once said that for us in Africa, we should neither face the West nor face the East, talking about the blocks, the ideological blocks in the world, that our interest, and that advice is still one that should resonate with us today. And that's why I said earlier, it really doesn't matter whether it's the old powers or the emerging middle powers that we talk about in the world today, whether it's China or America or Russia. Africans have no business being caught in other people's wars. We should focus on what can advance the interest of Africans. And that interest is to do what I said earlier, eradicate poverty and inequality in our continent. So whatever we can do to avoid, that's not to suggest that some of us will not be drawn into proxy wars. Wars that are not ours, but that we get drawn into. But as a collective, the African Union should not find itself in any situation in which we are collectively drawn into. If you go to the new globe that you're talking about, there's a sense in which many think that there's a new scramble for Africa. If you go to the Sahel region of Africa now, where you've had some military coups, you will see that those countries have become a playground again for some external forces. You will see, because now in Iran, provide them with an alternative. And really, my position is we shouldn't allow ourselves as a continent to be drawn into issues collectively. I would give that question to Mr. President and also give Mr. President the question on why Africa. happy to answer them. Thank you.
Professor Fayemi has written down these questions, the ones he says I must answer, but I can't read his handwriting. The African unity in this country, here in South Africa, is very old. It comes from the 19th century. Africa must unite. I'm sure the principals here know this, if the students don't. The Christian church came to South Africa from Europe. So all of the bishops and the pastors and this and the other were European. At some point in the 19th century, the African converts to Christianity decided to Africanize the Christian churches, to bring them to the continent. And so we, the Africans, must also be. So you then had break. So the Africans, they say, in which case we are going to break away and form our own Presbyterian church or Methodist church or whatever other church. And you know what those churches were called? They called themselves the breakaway churches in the 19th century in South Africa. They called themselves the Ethiopian church. They didn't call themselves the South African church. They said we are the Ethiopian church. The reason for that was because as this process of colonization took place, as Professor Fayemi and myself were talking about, Ethiopia at that point had not been colonized. So you had this one independent African state which had not been colonized by anybody. And that was the African aspiration. So this independent African church was called an Ethiopian church because Ethiopia represented what the rest of the Africans wanted in this country. So I'm saying to you that the idea of Africa must unite is a very, very old idea in this country, in the politics of this phenomenon from the 19th century. Even Colonel Gaddafi, what he was following on Kwame Unite, is very, very indigenous to the African continent. It's not unique to any particular leader. It's very African leader. A specific question at the form. In 2007, the African Union met in Accra to do that particular. We agree about unity. And Colonel Gaddafi was saying, by the time we finish this conference, we must have agreed a president for Africa, a foreign minister for Africa, a defense minister for Africa, African Central Bank, as Professor Fayemi was saying, all of these things. All of us are here in this hall, says Colonel Gaddafi. Why don't we take these decisions? And in Zoom, he offered her, he said, that's my foreign minister. She is going to be the foreign minister of Africa. So that was his idea. There was a hot debate. And what it resolved itself into was, yes, we agree to the concept of a United States of Africa. The challenge is, how do you get there? And Colonel Gaddafi said, we can take a decision here in Accra and implement it. But the majority said no. That might be desirable, but it's too ambitious. It's not going to happen. Better to come at it from below. Rather than impose the United States of Africa, let it develop from below in the SADC region. a regional parliament in ECOWAS in West Africa. And then when those two regions meet, or these regions meet, they are meeting, you begin the process of going towards the United States of Africa. The only difference was how to get there. The difference was not the desirability. And I'm sure that sentiment remains. What the principal was saying, again, I'm coming back to this, that we share a common destiny. The best form, the best way to achieve that destiny together as quickly as possible is via that United States. But clearly, I think the majority of the continent was correct to say, you can't impose it. It's got to come from below, because part of what you've got to do, the president of South Africa coming out of Accra must report to the South African population that the sentiment on the continent is that we must have a United States of Africa. What do you South Africans think? So that is not an exclusive matter of the political leaders. The population must be involved. So I'm saying that what was in debate was how do we get there? Top down or bottom up? And the majority view then, and I'm quite sure the majority, whether it's being done or not, these are things that Professor Fayemi can answer. But that would be our position. Colonel Gaddafi was very much the top-down man. Can be done, must be done, and he didn't see why we thought it was all difficult. But as I said, the majority opinion went the other way. Professor Fayemi, you said there was another question I must answer. Who's blocking the Africans from working together? Yes. Okay, I see. Oh, I see. Working together. I can see that. Thanks. Let me tell you a story. It's a real story. I visited one of the African, I was president of the Republic, paid a state visit to one of the African countries. I won't mention the name of the country, but one of the ministers says to me, I have been to Cape Town and I saw the waterfront in Cape Town, very well developed, very good, very excellent, very, very inspired. And he said, one of our ministries owns the waterfront in his country. And so when we reported to our cabinet that, Cape Town has done something absolutely marvelous, let's copy the Cape Town waterfront. Yeah. So it was agreed. So they sent a delegation here, they talked to the waterfront people in Cape Town and so on to say, can we form a partnership to build our own waterfront in our own country? The matter was agreed. We'll supply the land and this and that and the other, and you'll come with your expertise in all of that. So it was agreed. So the minister says to me, and President, 6 months after that agreement signed and everything, I realized that nothing is moving in terms of our waterfront. So I inquired, I said, but why are the South Africans not here? And discovered that my country had not issued the visas for the South Africans to come. South Africans were ready, but no visa. So, So I then check with the people in my country who issue visas and said, but why are we not issuing the visas? That there were some officials in a European country who instructed the visa issuers in my country not to issue the visas. to the South Africans. That's why the visas were not issued, because the European country instructed my nationals not to issue the visas. So I say, why? Because that European country says, if you want to build a waterfront, do it with us in Europe, not with the South Africans. Keeping the Africans apart. It was very specific. This must be in the interest of a European country. This African development, that interest remains. That interest remains the part of what is unfortunate is that sentiment, which is keeping us apart, is also among us Africans. This same country I'm talking about, African country. There was some African international, in fact it's a conference of the South. Africa, Latin America, Asia, and so on, met there. I attended the conference, accompanied me to the airport, continent and this and that and the other. And he says to me, now, President, next time you come, visit us again, please, we must continue this conversation. So when you come, you can call me. I said, sure, I'll do that. So I put it in my pocket. We took off. So as we are flying, I decided to have a look at this card. Principal, this card has got the name of the minister, has got the ministry, and all the contact details, telephone numbers and all that, in that country. You turn it round. It's got the same name, same ministry, contact numbers in Europe. This African is not aware of what he's saying. On this side of the business card, I'm African. On this side, I'm European. He's not embarrassed. He gives me the card and I'm saying, Those are some of the people who are keeping us apart. Other Africans who continue to owe loyalty to the country that colonized them. We also find that sentiment, that phenomenon. But I think the bulk of it, I suppose, is Professor Fayemi. And suddenly he says, no, I don't want you to own me anymore. And take the last example I give you, without again naming names. An African president addresses the nation, goes on radio and television, it's an address to the nation. And he says, literally, in African, I am French first, and this country next. I'm talking about these other people who keep us apart, who are African. But I'm saying your biggest force are the ones who used to own us. To study this phenomena, talk about them, educate us as young people so that we don't repeat this. Professor Fayemi says that this independence we talk about as African countries, it must have content. It must have substance. It's independence of thought, even identity. He said, are you Africans? And are you proudly African? And we said, yes, we are. That is very, very critical to achieving this objective. That we ceased to be owned by other people. And we ourselves act and behave in a manner that says we own ourselves and will determine our destiny, as the principal was saying. Thanks.
Well, Mr. President has encapsulated all those questions, and I'm afraid time is not very much on our side. I understand we still have an engagement before we leave, Ms. Principal, so we may not be able to take more than one question. This is going to be the lucky person. Oh, yes, I'll take you. No. Okay, I'll make you two because I can see you are persistent. No, I'm talking about the lady. Yes, you. Oh, sorry. I thought you were a lady.
It's you. No, it's okay.
Yeah?
We take one and we take this one too.
Okay, I'll take you, yes. So I'll take both of you. You will have the last.
Good morning. My name's Logan, and from Wilmington High School. My question is, what role should young Africans play in shaping the continent's future, as well as the newer opportunities that the current generation has that previous generations didn't?
Obviously, you had a vision of what South Africa ought to be and what it ought to look like. Do you think that reality has been something that we've been able to achieve as a country? If not, why, and what advice do you have? And the second question is, what advice, looking at the current state of South Africa, do you have for fellow South Africans, how they can actually go about addressing the injustice and the social differences within the country while still accommodating foreign nationals and maintaining that ideal of like a united Africa and as one? Thank you.
Okay. Fantastic question. Let me attempt to answer Logan's question so that Mr. President can have the last word in responding to yours. What advantages do you have now that we didn't have or that the President's generation didn't have in trying to promote the goal of African unity? Well, obviously, one that I can immediately see is that you have technology. When we were growing up, I mean, you communicate now in milliseconds about what you feel, and you can connect with your contemporaries in other parts of Africa and the rest of the world. I mean, but that doesn't necessarily often translate into substance and content. Maybe this is where you need to then stand back and reflect on your environment and the information you're able to gather in milliseconds. Everything that the President and I are saying to you now, you can go to ChatGPT. And I'm sure you do that. You don't, Logan. You don't go to ChatGPT. Oh, you must be a unique... You must be a unique young man. Well, you know, I don't mean ChatGPT negatively or in the sense of plagiarizing what is there for your school essay or anything of that nature. I use it to check information. And I encourage you all to do so. Whether it's Claude or ChatGPT or whatever, Gemini, whatever AI tools that are available to you. That's one advantage you have. But this could also lead to information overload, which could then become a disadvantage if it is not sifted, if it is not weighed against other experiences. And that's where it's important that education plays its role. And geography is also part of education. Travel is education. Because what I tend to discover amongst many of our young people is that we don't know enough of our own history. The way we know what happened in World War II, the role Winston Churchill played. You probably may not know what the Imfekane or who Uthman Dan Fodio was in the Islamic, but sometimes it's the European slavery we know. We don't even know that there are other forms. How we have this community in places like Zanzibar, in East Africa, who are products of the Arab slavery. So I think it's important that we must know our own history. And if the curriculum does not do enough of it, there must be an agitation for the curriculum to reflect a lot more of content about African history, African society, against ourselves. Too, as young Africans, and then you have other sources. You have entertainment, you have music. They can play a significant role in this. There used to be Pan-African festivals of arts and culture. When the president was in Nigeria, there was FESTAC, Festival of Arts and Culture, in Africa. We still have FESPACO, I think it's in Burkina Faso regularly. I don't know why it happens now that we've had a military intervention there. That really goes deep into the past, into the role of culture in development, so that we're not disconnected from our own roots and just embrace things from external environment that do not necessarily advance the progress and development that we're looking for in our own environment. So I think culture that can tie our communities and constituencies a lot more together. And I think young people are audacious. That's the advantage of youth. Audacity, courage, boldness, determination. These are values that are so important in the quest for this Pan-African unity that we're talking about. And as the president has said, this is not a new thing. It's come way back from our history, 19th century. So it's not a new agenda that is being placed on the table, but it has greater resonance now because as individual countries, our chances of accelerated development is limited. But as a collective, we have a greater opportunity not to end up on the menu, but to be co-rule makers in the new world that is emerging, rather than rule takers. Because in the old world that is just fraying, literally only UN Charter was developing. Ethiopia, as the president said, and Liberia. And then outside of continental Africa, in global Africa, Haiti was the only other country that joined in that post-1945 agenda. So you could say we were not even at the table. We were on the menu. As the world is changing before our very eyes, that duty does not belong to President Mbeki's generation again, to ensure that Africa does not remain on the menu, but on the table, designing, co-designing that agenda. The last word to the president. Yes. I think how do we ensure that the current xenophobia is tackled, but also the economic challenges leading to it, in some cases, are dealt with?
Thanks. I'm told that we need to be short because you people need to go back to class. I see the protests. 1994 came, and all of us South Africans, for the first time, we got to very successful political change takes place. And for the first time, South Africa is owned by all of us. And having done that, we then say, what's our next task? We've achieved this first change, very, very important. What is this thing that we must do? To summarize it, major strategic task is to eradicate the legacy of colonialism and apartheid. You remember the period I'm talking about, colonialism and apartheid, is about 350 years. About. What was established as a South African legacy during 350 years? We've got to eradicate that legacy. The new South Africa will be defined by the fact that that legacy is gone. You know that legacy, what it is. I was telling Professor Fahimi yesterday that once we had a foreign visitor who came. We met here in Cape Town. And there was a program there which was called Working for Water. It was to remove alien vegetation. Those foreign trees, alien trees which drink a lot of water, the gum trees and all that. So we went right up to the mountains to implement that program, Working for Water. And then drove down into Cape Town. And I was saying to him that I'm quite certain that even the foreign guest that I was hosting was sitting with me in the car, could have told that this part of Cape Town, this is the white suburbs. You could tell as you are coming down, very clear, that these are the white suburbs, these are the colored areas, these are the African areas. It's very distinct. That legacy. As part of the legacy, I'm saying we have to deal with. And that legacy will remain, I'm talking about this spatial thing, space. It's right across the country. We have not removed the legacy of colonialism and apartheid in every respect. Progress has been made. This meeting here, Principal, that we meet as these schools in this way and interact with one another in this way is a giant step forward to get rid of that legacy. This is major, major progress. I'm saying that's a challenge. Poor, there's a lot of poverty in the country. A lot of poverty. But that poverty has got a color. It's black and white. There's a lot of unemployment in the country. That employment has got color. It's black and white. And the reason for all of those things, we have not dealt with eradicating this legacy. Once I was going to visit Europe, one European country, and I knew they were very militant about levels of crime in South Africa, the Europeans. Because they are misrepresenting the incidence of crime in the country. So I took the crime statistics from the South African Police Service, looked at Johannesburg, And one of the police areas is Rosebank. And you looked at the crime statistics at Rosebank compared to the crime statistics in Alexander Township. It's two different worlds altogether. There were no murders in Rosebank. There were murders in Alex. I'm saying even the types of crime, you can tell. Even the days of the crimes. If you said to me, tell me the crime picture of Cape Town during the week, I can tell you that from Friday to Monday, in this area, you'll get this type of crime. It's because we have not dealt with the eradication of this legacy of colonialism and apartheid. And as Professor Fahimi was saying, that becomes your responsibility. I'm sure our generation did what it could. But the fact of the matter that we have not quite succeeded. It has to be your responsibility, this generation, to say the task to eliminate the legacy of colonialism apartheid remains, and we must deal with it. And principal, part of what it requires is that we must think, not believe everything that is written in the newspapers. The fact that it's written has got a big headline does not mean necessarily that it's true. It's true. You've got to think, you see, you've got this, your principals and teachers here and so on. Part of what they are trying to do is to teach you to inquire that and the other. You'll talk about the matter about undocumented, whoever, foreigners. How many are they? There's a problem. There are South Africans who say, who go marching up and down the streets against these undocumented people. How many are they? Nobody knows. By definition, once you say undocumented, it means nobody ever counted them. So why do you know? You don't know how many this thing is, but you say it's a problem. What kind of thinking is that? No South African knows how. What if you can't challenge that figure because you don't know? There was, I was told, I didn't see this, just now in these recent weeks, days, people in Durban, so-called undocumented, who went into some church building, like Konya or something, 300, 400, they are running away because we are chasing them because they are undocumented. So in the end, the police come and Home Affairs come, they count. Out of the 300, 400, there's only one was undocumented, one. One of the African countries, again, another story I'm told, part of what is reported is that there is a group of Africans from some African countries who are under attack, and their government sends a plane to come and fetch them. And who turns up at the airport? One. We are saying there's a problem of undocumented people. How many are they? What makes you say they are the problem? There's a problem of unemployment that's raised. Are these undocumented people? These are the ones who are taking our jobs. If I say to these people, take me to this place with these undocumented people who've taken your job, they can't. They don't know who they are. They don't know where they are. But somebody's got it into our heads that there's these undocumented people. I sat in government, a principal for what? In the presidency for 14 years. One of the principal challenges we had to deal with was this problem of unemployment. What are we going to do about this thing? Battled at it. There was never a single day when we ever said the reason we're not moving, if we're not moving, we did not have any such fact. There's a story that we tell, which is, fortunately, the principal is told by white professors. So it's not me talking about ourselves. The white professors are saying, if you look at South Africa from 1994 to around up and up and up and up. By the time you get to 2007, thereabouts, the South African economy is growing at 6% every year. Between 1994, when we voted, there are 8 million people employed in the formal economy. 8 million. By 1998, it's 14 million. 6 million new jobs were added during the other day. I was saying, some African fellow, this was years of jobless growth. 8 million jobs were added, but he claimed it was jobless because he's not thinking. I'm saying your white professors, they give you all the figures. And they say even these institutions we're talking about, Constitutional Court and the Human Rights Court, the Gender Commission, this one, they come from the same period. Your laws, your regulations, your this. South Africa was on the up and up and up and up. The story that is, as South Africans, we failed to deal with ourselves is not true. Then, around 2009, things changed. Went exactly the opposite direction. So a question arises, why that change? It was all of a sudden, almost overnight. The South Africans were creating new jobs, and these rates of unemployment were going down, and levels of poverty were going down. That's when we introduced these grants, social grants and so on, because we were generating the money. Principal, the white professors, they say, 2004, since 1910, it was that government which produced a budget surplus so that we had money, have the money to pay the poor people. Then suddenly it changed. It went the other direction. Why? What changed? It was the same government, the same people. I'm saying to the students here, we must think and read to understand that. What is this thing that changed? And the reason there was that change, that sudden jump, is because there were other South Africans who did not like the success that was happening. They didn't like it. And decided we must bring it down. And succeeded. The problems we're having today were manufactured. Professor Fayemi here, you have said you are technologically savvy. I believe him. I think was telling the truth. So I'm going to give you a challenge. You will find on the internet 2 reports. The Judicial Commission of Inquiry was chaired by retired Judge Robert Nugent. The President Ramaphosa appointed that commission beginning of 2018 to inquire into what was happening to the South African Revenue Service. So Judge Nugent prepared an interim report and a final report. Both of them are on the internet. You should read them. The reason the Nugent Commission of Inquiry into the South African Revenue Service was appointed was because of what I'm talking about. The South African Revenue Service, the students may not remember this, they were too young, but the principals and the teachers will remember it. That for a number of years, the South African Revenue Service was overperforming. At the beginning of the year, they would say, we are going to collect R1 billion. And would say, Viva SARS. End of the financial year, they say, we've collected $1.25 billion. For a number of years, the SARS was overperforming in terms of collection of revenue. Until around 2014, when the opposite started happening. SARS started under-collecting. That is why President Ramaphosa appointed that Judicial Commission of Inquiry to say, can you please answer this question? This SARS, which was performing so well, all of a sudden is underperforming. What's the problem? And what I'm summarizing the conclusion by Judge Nugent. Judge Nugent says there were people who wanted South Africa to fail. SARS collects 95% or something like that of state revenues. The people who worked to destroy SARS did not steal a single cent. They tried to destroy the institution. What is the outcome of that? If you destroy civil servants or the police or the army or anything, the country is broke. And that report said, so that this democratic state fails. I'm saying SARS was over-collecting, SARS started under-collecting. The economy was going this way, suddenly the economy went the other way, to this day. And that's your task, to look at what has happened to this country. So the explanations were given that no, the reason we're not getting jobs is because of unregistered, undocumented fraud. It's not true. There's no such thing. I'm saying even the people who make the claim, they can't tell you how many of these undocumented people are, because by definition, you don't know how many there are. So whether it's 1 or 20 or 50, that's a problem. It can't be true. But I'm saying practically from the work we did, we actually know what happened. So to respond to this xenophobic thing, let's tell the truth about ourselves to ourselves and not continue to manufacture fairy tales. When we have failed, we must say we have failed and not go and blame somebody else. We are staying at a hotel here in Cape Town. We've been staying there now for what, 2 nights, 3 nights? They are the waiters. Because one of the standard examples that is given of undocumented foreigners They are all in the restaurants. They've taken our jobs. There's not a single foreigner in that restaurant. They're all South African, from beginning to end. There's not a single foreigner. But this part of the allegation is that look at the restaurants in South Africa. They are occupied by these undocumented people. It's like I walked into a restaurant, they say, waiter, give me your document so I can see whether you are documented or not. In the end, I'm saying, colleagues, what Professor Fayemi is saying is correct. Something was done to eradicate that legacy of colonial way is progress. This thing is new. It's a result of 94. Very positive, very correct. But there's a lot that remains to be done. And the people who must do it is yourselves. And in order to do it, you must think. Don't say, I believe. Okay, so you say, or say that on Sunday when you go to church or Friday at mosque. You can say, I believe that, that's fine. But once you've gone there, you don't believe, think. And say, how do we solve this problem? That becomes your responsibility. And we are both of us very confident that you will live up to that responsibility. But principals, let me say thanks a lot for having us. We are sorry to disturb your classes. I want to say thanks a lot to Professor Fayemi here for taking on this responsibility to answer so many questions. But principal, thanks a lot to yourself, to the other principals, and to the students. If you want us to come again, because you are very important people, our future is in your hands. But thanks a lot.
I will just say something after you.
Good morning, everyone. President Thabo Mbeki, Dr. Fayemi, and distinguished guests. My name is Nzala Mativa, and on behalf of Milnerton, I would like to say the vote of thanks. Firstly, I would love to thank President Thabo Mbeki and Dr. Fayemi for gracing us with your presence today. It was our utmost gratitude to welcome you today. And I would like to sing this Africa Day that we all come here to celebrate. And may we all leave today with the words and the wisdom that you...
Before I hand over to Mr. Kasim for final arrangements, first of all, just from my side also, President and Professor, thank you for sharing your wisdom. But a huge thank you to all the schools and learners out there sharing your questions. And I truly believe, and as the President and Professor was saying, we truly believe in you. Let's go out there. Let's challenge everything. Let's think, like the President was saying. Don't believe everything. But we need to be united. We need to challenge this difficult situation. I am an African. So I think, let everybody stand up and say, I am an African. Congratulations and thank you very much. I just want to ask, before I give to Mr. Kasim, that the representatives in the foyer We just want to sign the visitor's book, but also be a commitment that we will continue this conversation and invite everybody back. And then lastly, a huge, huge thank you to the Thabo Mbeki that made this possible, Mr. Bulani Vetu, that made this connection that we could experience this wonderful Wisdom Day. Thank you very much, and thank you for your engagement. Thank you.
In Berlin in 1884 through to 1885, they agreed to divide Africa into spheres of influence for purposes of exploitation, so that the Germans had their share. If you remember, the Germans were present in what we now call Namibia. They were present in what we now call Benin, but was then known as Dahomey. They were present in what is now a part of Ghana, which was then the Togoland, the Volta area. The Belgians were present in Rwanda and Urundi, and they were also present in what is now the Democratic Republic of Congo. The Italians, to the extent that they could, tried to occupy Ethiopia and Eritrea, and were present in a portion of Somalia. The British were present, of course, in Uganda, in Kenya, in Nyasaland, in Rhodesia, and in Nigeria, and in many other places. The French, of course, were also present. And all these powers, even the Spaniards, were present in Equatorial Guinea, as were the Portuguese. And the whole idea was to use the resources, both natural and human, of the African continent, so that the partition of Africa was one that was designed to benefit the European powers. The partition was arbitrary. If you look at the nation states that we now have, or is it states that we now have with many nations in them, every other African country that we are talking about now is struggling to be a state. All of them, without exception, all of them. And this is what Pixley Kaisa Kasemo was saying. How will we regenerate this continent? And it's instructive that he was talking at a time when the entire continent of Africa was under colonization, excluding Liberia and Ethiopia, all of them. And therefore, when in 1945, Africans were represented in Manchester, Kwame Nkrumah was present at that meeting, Marcus Garvey was present at that meeting, Jomo Kenyatta was present at that meeting, Obafemi Awolowo was present at that meeting. The drive was to decolonize Africa. And one of the things that amazes me is that at that time, these individuals did not have the internet, they did not have WhatsApp, they did not have the kind of communication that we have now. But it is amazing at how they were communicating. Even air transport was not as it is now. I was just recently reading the activities of one of the greatest Africans who, in my view, ever lived, and whom many people do not know about. The great Ghanaian James Emmons Kwegyir Aggrey, normally referred to as Aggrey of Africa, and how he traveled from the United States and went to many countries in Africa, traveling by sea and talking about why Africa should be united. And that was part. And famously in 1949, Ghana's Kwame Nkrumah is saying, seek ye first the political kingdom, and the rest will be given unto you. And I dare say that the rest has never been given to us. And even if it is coming too slowly. But it is instructive that at that time, the Spirit was about the continent of Africa. We were conscious, the leaders were conscious that Africa decolonized without unity would remain weak. And of course, Africa is weak. The weakest continent on earth is this continent in which we are, our continent. So the struggle for independence was everywhere across the world, across the continent of Africa. So when on the 6th day of March, Ghana regained her independence as Ghana, it was then Gold Coast. I think the most eloquent and the most passionate warrior for Pan-Africanism was Nkrumah. He said on that day, and again later, that the independence of Ghana means nothing if the rest of Africa is not free. And he meant it. Because when Ghana regained independence in 1957, 1 year later, Guinea regained her independence. A year later, the French Sudan, or what we now call Mali, regained her independence. They signed a pact to create what they call the African Union. They thought at that time that that would be Africa in her embryonic days. And they invited Patrice Emery Lumumba in 1961, but of course Emery Lumumba was then assassinated in the month of January 1961. And he won. This is one of the things that always stands out in my mind. That Nkrumah, of all leaders at that time, was able to see that if we were not united, we would go nowhere. So in 1958, he summons a meeting in Accra, Ghana, of the then independent African countries and tells them, if we don't unite now, the neo-colonialist is going to ensure that we remain disunited and we remain small, and they are going to ensure that the neo-colonial project continues. In 1961, on the first day of January, again in Casablanca, Morocco, he tells his audience, let us unite now, before each one of our leaders begins to get used to power, because power is easy to get used to. You who have been elected will know. Once you become a minister and you become used to people saluting you and opening your doors, if it happens for 1 month, you will find it very difficult if you lose your ministerial position when there is nobody to salute you and to open your doors. That is how attractive power can be. And he won the people then. But the colonial project was alive and well, because as they were meeting in Casablanca, Morocco, there was another group that was meeting in Monrovia in Liberia. That is how Africa started splitting. Creating two groups, the Casablanca group and the Monrovia group. The Casablanca group, which comprised, I think famously, Kwame Nkrumah was there from Ghana, Gamal Abdel Nasser was there from Egypt, Ahmed Ben Bella was there from Algeria, Modibo Keita was there from Mali. They took the view, unite now. The Monrovia group, comprised of William Tubman at that time. Emperor Haile Selassie was also in the Monrovia group. Mwalimu Kambarage Nyerere was in the Monrovia group. They took the view, we want to unite, but gradually. Let it be gradual. So that when Emperor Haile Selassie of Ethiopia convenes a meeting in Addis Ababa on the 23rd through to the 25th day of May 1963, there are two groups already. The Pan-African agenda is already being watered down. There is the Casablanca group and there is the Monrovia group. And the creation of the OAU was a victory for the Monrovia group. And I want you to, there were 32 heads of states and government who met in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia on the 23rd through to the 25th day of May, the year 1963. And I want you to listen to all of those speeches, or the compilation of them. There is a compilation of them that was made in the year 2013 when we were celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Organization of African Unity. And listen to all the speeches, and I pick out a speech from the leader of Central African Republic, David Dacko. David says, Central African Republic is so small that if we are not a part of an African Union, the French will come again. And they have come again. Mwalimu Nyerere of Tanzania says, we are not here in order to remind ourselves of how important unity is. We are here to talk about the unity of Africa. The host, Emperor Haile Selassie of Ethiopia, says, it is important for us to realize that we must make sacrifice for the future because a disunited Africa will never realize our potential. But the most passionate speech again was that of Kwame Nkrumah. He tells them, let us not live here without one government, without one army, without one currency, and without having chosen a capital. And I propose that the capital of the new Africa either be located in Bangui in Central African Republic or Leopoldville, now Kinshasa in the Democratic Republic of Congo. But I'm open to any other suggestion. And let us live here once we have put together a council of foreign ministers in order to begin to work towards an African Union. That is Kwame Nkrumah. Nobody listened to him. We ended up with the OAU. And the story of the OAU can be told and retold. Some say that it was a toothless bulldog. Others say that it was not even a dog. But whatever it was, it cannot be denied that it made a contribution to the process of decolonization of the continent in many ways, complete with the establishment of the liberation unit of it, which was headquartered in Dar es Salaam in the United Republic of Tanzania, which was spearheaded the decolonization of quite a number of countries at that time. But the point that I'm making is that the Pan-African spirit at that time was about a united Africa. Because you will remember at that time that France never wanted to leave and has never left. It is always instructive that when the French left, they formed an organization called Organization for French-Speaking Countries. The British also created their own Commonwealth of independent nations. But what is instructive is that the Queen is always the head of those independent nations. I've never understood that. Perhaps the presidents do. The Portuguese, of course, you know, never left easily. Until 1980, when I was an adult, they were still fighting in Mozambique, in Cape Verde, in Guinea-Bissau, in Angola, and in Mozambique. The apartheid regime, of course, only left in 1994, and I wonder whether they have left. That is Africa for you. So that the fears of Kwame Nkrumah that if we were not united, we would have problems, started haunting us. He said that if we are not united in the Pan-African spirit, what is going to happen is that the imperialist is going to control us. They are going to emphasize our ethnic differences. And they are going to ensure that we begin fighting amongst one another. And as we do so, they are going to exploit us. And they started. In January 1961, they assassinated Patrice Emery Lumumba, and Congo has never been the same again. In 1963, they assassinated Sylvanus Olympio in Togo, and Togo has never been the same again. Then there were coup d'etats, Kwame Nkrumah himself. In 1966, eliminated via coup d'etat, all his writings, all his speeches banned, never to be read, never to be listened to until 1972 when Ignatius Kutu Acheampong rehabilitated him. Ahmed Ben Bella in Algeria, gone. In Nigeria, Nnamdi Azikiwe and Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, gone. In Mali, Modibo Keita, gone. In Chad, everywhere, coup d'etats. Here in Ethiopia, 1974, if I'm not wrong, coup d'etat and the emergence of the Derg regime. In East Africa, Uganda, coup d'etat, mutinies in Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania in 1971. All orchestrated because we were disunited and we were weak. The predictions of our forefathers and founding mothers that disunited we would remain weak came true. That is the history of it. So that today, when we talk about the African continent and we talk about Pan-Africanism, we must understand it in the context of that history. And you will remember that it is not as if Africa never realized or never recognized that our weakness would be in our disunity. We did. We did. Because regionally we were trying to integrate. We were in the East African community, we were creating the East African community. In South Africa, we were creating SADC. In West Africa, we were creating ECOWAS. In Central Africa, we were creating the Organization of Central African Communities. In the North, we were creating the Maghreb. Even in this region, we were converting IGAD into something in the nature of an economic community. We were creating COMESA. We were aware that Africa could only operate and operate meaningfully if we were integrated. We are not trading with one another. Intra-African trade is not anything beyond 15%, the lowest anywhere in the world. If you look at all our sectors and look at them, look at our agriculture, almost all African countries are net food importers. There is not a single African country that is in meaningful technology. Not a single African country produces a mobile phone. Yet the single most important ingredient in mobile telephony is to be found in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Not a single African country produces a car other than assembling completely knocked down kits. There is no meaningful production of pharmaceutical products in Africa. And if there was any doubt, COVID exposed it. All African countries, the 55 of them, are waiting to either receive Sinovac from China, Sputnik from Russia, AstraZeneca, Johnson or Moderna. And we don't even know what they are because our bureaus of standardization don't know. If you ask the Ethiopian Bureau of Standards what they are asking us to be injected with, they do not know. They just believe it is a vaccine because the Americans have said so or because the Chinese have said so. Africa is weak, so that even this magnificent edifice, I suspect, has not been erected by Ethiopian engineers. When I see the signage in Chinese, I suspect it is the Chinese. That is how weak we are. That is the reality of our mother continent. It is because we are politically weak, we are economically weak, socially we are disorganized, culturally and spiritually we are confused. That is the continent in which we are today. And the question, therefore, what would we do continentally in terms of trade? In 1980, under the Lagos Plan of Action, and some of you have been ambassadors, some of you are now serving cabinet ministers, you will grapple with this on a daily basis. Under the Lagos Plan of Action, Africa sat down in Lagos and said, we are going to improve trade amongst ourselves. 1980, Lagos Plan of Action. Did we do it? No, we did not do it. We did not do it because the European Union was instead engaging us under the African Caribbean, the Lomé Convention of 1975, or the Cotonou Convention of 2000. Africa remains the only continent which is described as Anglophone. So in Kenya or Uganda, where possibly only 20% speak the English language, we are Anglophone. In French, former French colonies, they are Francophone. In former Portuguese colonies, they are Lusophone. In some Arab countries, they are Arabophone. That is who we are. So, when the OAU met in 2013, they asked the question, what happened to the Pan-African spirit? And when, therefore, they met in Sirte, in Libya, under the tutelage at that time of Muammar al-Gaddafi, it was resolved in 1999 that the OAU be renamed and be referred to as the African Union, and it was launched, as you know, in Durban, South Africa in the year 2000. But one of the most important things in the 2013 was the speech of the then chairman of the OAU Council, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, here in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. And I want you to read that letter, which I'll paraphrase, in which she writes an imaginary letter to Kwame Nkrumah. He tells and apologizes to Kwame, telling Kwame, we apologize to you because we did not listen to you. We are weak because we did not listen to you. We are divided into 54, 55, depending on whether the Moroccans agree that Sahrawi is a country. Nobody cares about us. And brothers and sisters, if you want to know how weak we are, and we are weak, look at how we are treated. Last month, the world met in New York. The General Assembly. When African heads of states and government are speaking, the hall is empty. Nobody bothers because they are saying nothing. And even if they are saying something, it is something that can be ignored. Compare when an African head of state and government is speaking and when the Prime Minister of Little Israel is speaking. They will listen because we are weak and disunited. So we have a weak continent because the spirit of Pan-Africanism disappeared. So the question that we can ask, what is the state of Pan-Africanism as we speak today? The African Union, which is weak, says the right things and does the wrong things 9 out of 10 times. And what are the critical areas in which we are weak? We are weak politically because nobody listens to us. On the 3rd day of March, 1900, on the 6th day of March, 1997, Mwalimu Julius Kambarage of Tanzania, speaking in Accra, Ghana, on the occasion of the 40th anniversary of the independence of Ghana, said, the speech is entitled, "We Unite or We Perish." And Mwalimu says, I want to apologize to Kwame Nkrumah. Those of us who believed in gradualism were wrong. Nkrumah was right. But Nkrumah also did not appreciate the level of suspicion that existed amongst the leaders at that time. Our generation, he says, fought for the liberation of Africa. It is the duty of the new generation to carry the torch forward, he says in his plea. He says that I do not believe that the tribe can be the basis of mobilization in Africa. And he said that as I travel along across the world, people do not care about our Tanzanianness or our Ghanaianness or our Kenyanness or our Ethiopianness. In their eyes, we are all Africans. And perhaps that is what we should use as the building block in order to talk about African unity. But we are not being naive about that unity. Because sometimes when we talk about Pan-Africanism and about African unity, people think we are being too simplistic about it. No, it is not being simplistic and being naive. It is recognizing that as long as we remain the way we are, then Africa in the next 25 years will be recolonized. You know, what is the state of Africa as I speak now? What is the state of your continent as we speak now? Because of our disunity. Because when we are disunited, then it is good for Europe and America. and China progressively. Look at the state of your continent as I speak. Conflicts of one kind or another. I'll name the countries just for you to know how bad it is, because that is how it is. Go to northern Mozambique. The gas that is there cannot be produced because there is conflict. Northern Mozambique. Go to Somalia. Conflict. Here in your motherland, conflict. Go to South Sudan, conflict. Go to Sudan, conflict. Go to Libya, conflict. Go to Central African Republic, conflict. Go to the Democratic Republic of Congo, conflict. Go to Burkina Faso, conflict. Go to Mali, conflict. Go to Chad, conflict. Go to Niger, conflict. Go to Cameroon, conflict. Go to Nigeria, conflict. Do I go on? That is the state of the continent. So that even when we talk about intercontinental trade, you tell me, can you drive from Addis Ababa to Dakar in Senegal? Unless you are Daredevil himself. Which group will not kidnap or ambush you? That is the state of the continent because we are weak and disunited. I fly from Nairobi, Kenya for 1.5 hours. I come from the shilling zone. I go into the birr. 33 currencies in Africa. 33 currencies. None of which is used to conclude transactions anywhere. I come to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and I show my shilling. They say, what is this? But let me show the dollar. Oh, this is it. Let me show the euro. This is it. 80% of transactions in Africa are concluded outside of the continent in dollars. So you may have the Central Bank or the Federal Bank of Ethiopia, or Mickey Mouse. You may have the Central Bank of Kenya, Mickey Mouse. You may have all these 54 central banks useless because we are not playing in the real league, we are playing in the small league. That is why when the Chinese president summons all our presidents, and they summon them, the letters may be polite, but it's summons. They go to Beijing, tails between their legs, and they are told. Then the Chinese president gives Africa $60 billion. $60 billion. What is $60 billion? George Bezos has more than that given to a whole continent. That is the state of the continent. So as you have the honor and privilege of serving in the government of Ethiopia, and as you think about integration, that is the continent in which you are now weak. 2 weeks ago, I watched in great pain on television in Bamako, Mali, young Malians celebrating in the streets that the government of Mali had entered into successful or possible successful negotiation with what to replace the French. And they are saying how beautiful it is now. And I said, a slave celebrating the departure of one slave master and the arrival of another slave master. That is the state in which we are. I watched a woman from Nigeria who had been rescued from the Mediterranean around Lampedusa saying, I will not go back to Africa. Even if I die in the Mediterranean, I'll try again and again. What is it that can make a human being say that I do not want to go back to my home? Because the natural instinct of a human being should be that you want to go home. It's because we are weak. So we are invited to Beijing. Then we are invited to Tokyo, the Japanese African Conference. Then we are invited to Europe. Then we are invited to the United States. And lately, even the Arabs invite us because we are weak. That is Africa now. But let me conclude by looking at Africa in the future. What is the state of Pan-Africanism? Africa finds herself in a very difficult situation. What Nkrumah feared. Today, many African leaders have gotten used to the trappings of power. And those who speak about power, right? Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. I remember in 1997, I think, I may be wrong about the year, 1995, I think, I was serving as an intern at the Mwalimu Julius Nyerere Foundation in Dar es Salaam. And I had the privilege and honor of driving with Mwalimu Nyerere in Dar es Salaam. And he had only one guard and a driver. And he stopped at the few traffic lights and only moved when the traffic lights moved. And I asked him, Mwalimu, how did you leave power? He said, when I said I wanted to leave office, there was no shortage of people telling me, don't leave us as orphans. It is very rare to find those in positions of leadership in Africa today who would willingly leave office. Power in Africa is now sought by hook and crook and retained by hook and crook. Because the trappings of power are good. And permit me, when I am gone, even if I irritate you, in fact, perhaps my intention is to irritate you, so that you reflect upon what I'm going to say. And this is a personal thing. I'll give you an example. When I was appointed as the director of the Anti-Corruption Commission, I drove in the morning in my car with my driver. In the evening when I was leaving, there were 3 cars. Mine, what was allocated to me, and another one in front, and another one behind me, and 12 individuals. And I asked, who are these fellows? He said, these are your security. I said, I don't need my security. I don't need 2 cars, I only need 1 car. Because this thing you call security, this is spectacle. And throughout the period that I served, I had only 1 security and 1 car. And I say this because it is in the nature of power to make you use the things that you don't need. And once you get used to them, then without them, you feel empty and lonely. And you will find them. You'll be told, and many of you will love them. They are good. When doors are open for you, they are good. When you occupy front seats, it is good. When you address Your Excellency, it is good. When you eat the best food, it is good. When you have security, it is good. But it can also dehumanize you. It can also monsterize you. Is that we found human beings and we monsterize them. Writing in 1983, Nigeria's Chinua Achebe writes in a book which I commend to you, The Trouble with Nigeria, which could as well be the trouble with Africa. He says, the trouble with Nigeria is simply and squarely a problem of leadership. As we look at Africa today, I hope that this administration, which has now committed itself to the Pan-African movement, will think in that direction. And this brings me to what I think should be contemporary Pan-Africanism. If you look at the Treaty of the East African Community, the Treaty of the East African Community says that they are shared.
The Republic of Namibia, who is present in this assembly, permit me also to recognize the men and women who have organized this occasion, and those of you who have taken time to be with us this evening. I have written a paper which will be circulated to you in the fullness of time, and I hope that time will be full sooner rather than later, and that you shall have the occasion to read that paper and therefore to appreciate the full flavor of my presentation in a more disciplined way. Let me preface my presentation by reminding you that I do not claim to have the monopoly of wisdom. I remember as a young student of law being introduced to the great Greek philosopher Socrates. And I remember being told then that in those days of yore, the oracle of Apollo sent out emissaries into Greece to find out who was the wisest man. And they went yonder into Greece, and there were great thinkers, Aristophanes, Sophocles, and many others. And when they went to Socrates, when he was asked, "What do you know?" he said the only thing that he knew was that he knew nothing. And on that account, he was pronounced the wisest man in Greece. I too know nothing. And what I do is to share my experience, not because I have a different understanding of them, but it is my appreciation of those things as I walk across Africa and as I observe the continent of Africa. There is a tendency or an inclination to philosophize about the problems of Africa, to intellectualize about the problems of Africa, and sometimes to moralize about them. But the African problems are real. 2 to the Bangala woman in the Democratic Republic of Congo who has no place to rest because of a civil war. The problems are real. To the men and women who cannot go to school or have a morsel of food to eat in Bangui, in the Central African Republic, the problems are real. To those in Mogadishu, in Somalia, who cannot plan beyond 1 week because of Al-Shabaab, the problems are real. To the women who are escaping from rape to rape in Maiduguri, in northern Nigeria, the problems are real. To the young men and women who risk crossing the Sahara Desert to face the Mediterranean Sea in unseaworthy vessels, saying it is better to die trying than to live in my country, the problems are real. So when we are assembled here this evening, it is that Africa that we are examining. An Africa which, if you permit me to use this medical term, is schizophrenic. It presents a successful Botswana, a successful Namibia, where the GDP is something in the neighborhood of 12,000 United States dollars. But it also presents you with Equatorial Guinea, whose per capita income is 35,000 United States dollars, never mind the distribution. But it also has Central African Republic, which is not at ease. It provides you with South Sudan, the youngest nation in Africa, where the Nuer and the Dinka have risen against each other, and they are slaughtering each other, even in hostels and in churches and other places of worship. That is the Africa that you have. It is an Africa about which commentators have many things to say. It is an Africa about which they say Africa is rising without ever asking for whom does it rise. It is an Africa about which they say has the fastest growing economies in the world, with Angola at 9% or even more, with Ethiopia at 11% or even more. But tell the people in rural Angola and in rural Ethiopia that the economy is rising, they'll tell you that is voodoo economics. It is only economic romanticists who are writing papers in refereed journals that are talking about this, but on the ground, nothing is happening. They'll tell you about that Africa. And that is why, therefore, my presentation this evening is about Africa unleashing her potential. But one must go back to history in order to understand where we are and where it is that we are going and what it is that we ought to do going forward. We talk about globalization. But throughout history, Africa has always been globalized. The slave masters globalized us. We were commodified. Africa and Africans built Europe and America. Half of the population of Africa was taken away initially by the Arabs on the eastern coast, and ultimately on the western coast, and some from the southern coast, and taken in what was agrarian Europe and agrarian United States of America. And you built Europe and America by the sweat of thy brow. When slavery lost her luster, the colonial project came about, European countries sat, as history will remind you, in Berlin, in a conference that sometimes is called King Leopold's Conference, and parceled out Africa with undue regard to the realities on the ground. Your country was given out to the Germans. And the Germans did not stop there. They went to Tanganyika and took Tanganyika, and they did not stop there. They went to Dahomey and took yet another slider from that western coast. Even Portugal, little Portugal, took big Angola, and they took big Mozambique, and they took Guinea-Bissau and Cape Verde, and their neighbors did not rest. They were Johnny-come-latelys, and they got a sliver of land called Equatorial Guinea. And the British and the French, of course, took the lion's share. The Italians tried in Ethiopia without success, but succeeded in Libya. And the Belgians, little Belgium, took the Democratic Republic of Congo. And once again, when